Welcome back. You're listening to Weekly Review on TBS EFM. I'm your host, Rob Alahand, and this part of the show is called Media in Check. This is where we fill you in on some of the latest compelling issues going around in the media. And today we have a new reporter joining us in the studio to give us the scoop, to give us the hot news. So welcome to Angela Jung. Welcome to the studio today.
Thank you, Rob.
And can you tell us a little bit about yourself for listeners who haven't met you before?
Sure. So my name is Angela Jung. I was a reporter at Life Abroad, which is on air from 9 a.m. on Monday to Friday. I have quite a few jobs. I'm a grad student right now at a global MBA program in Seoul. And I'm also a manager at an art gallery, helping this gallery to recruit new up-and-coming artists.
Wow, so you really do wear kind of some very diverse hats.
Yes.
Which is great because having a variety of experiences, you never know where the next really interesting story or hot issue can come from.
Right.
And so we're glad that you're joining the team. I look forward to hearing what you have to say. And what about this week? What is our topic for today?
So the first story is about a show called SNL Korea by Coupang Play. The show has been criticized recently for making fun of sign language in one of its corners. On the 12th, in the Weekend Update corner, a reporter relaying the Olympic news and an AI robot interpreting it into sign language were produced. It was a satire on the controversy over the biased judgment at the Olympics, but the AI made a fun expression and gesture rather than a proper sign language. So this is why it was pointed out that deaf people's language being used as a source of laughter, and it was criticized.
Yeah, and that's always kind of a sensitive area where, you know, when you're making a joke about a disability, there are some comedians who find a way to do that and get a laugh but stay respectful.
Right.
But there are also some comedians who don't quite manage that and, you know, they hurt someone instead. So did they apologize, first of all? And if they did, how did they apologize?
So the production team of SNL Korea posted an apology on Coupang Play's Instagram account on the same day, saying, "We deeply apologize for causing concerns to many people in the process satirizing. In the future, we will do our best to provide a pleasant smile by paying attention to the subject matter and expression in the process of producing the program. But there are still some criticism that the apology did not mention any clear mistakes and does not contain a concrete will to prevent recurrence."
Yeah, I don't see any, you know, here's what we did wrong and here's what we'll change so that it doesn't happen again type specifics. And that old causing concerns kind of reminds me of the celebrity apology, "We're sorry if you were offended," which is kind of a non-apology if you really look at those words carefully. So this can be, I mean, a hurtful experience for those who are underprivileged and their families. And I know, I think of if a Western comedian made fun of Asian languages, right? Well, they would be criticized quite sharply by the Asian communities. So to me, it's also interesting seeing that type of sensitivity coming around to the languages that, for example, the deaf use to communicate as well.
Right.
So what about official comments about this offense in this situation?
So in response, the Center for Journalism and Human Rights said since season 2 started last December, it has continued to criticize and ridicule people with lower power and social status. So such demeaning laughter that leaves scars on anyone shall not be repeated.
Yeah, and then that's something I hear a lot about comedy is that idea that if your comedy is at the expense of people at lower social status, then it starts to sound kind of like bullying rather than just trying to find a good laugh. But this isn't the first time that this kind of insensitive comedy has come from the SNL Korea team, has it?
Right. So unfortunately, about 8 years ago in March 2014, SNL Korea aired Jason Do-young Anderson's line from the movie I'm Going to Meet You Now. The adoptee who speaks poor Korean meets his mother and was satirized in the show. This received official protests from overseas adoptees and foreigners as the adoptee's clumsy Korean pronunciation and exaggerated facial expressions were used as a material for laughter again.
Yeah, and again, right, being adopted is not something that a person has control over. So it seems unkind to make a joke about that. And I remember the advice, don't punch down, which is something that a lot of people say when comedians start making a joke at someone's expense. So we also have a second story today, though, and it's about private broadcasting stations in Gyeonggi Province, which are opposing the participation of local governments and quasi-governmental organizations in broadcasting.
Right. The 5 private operators in Gyeonggi Province that participated in the selection of contests for the terrestrial radio station 99.9 frequency submitted a joint proposal against the participation of local government and the Road Traffic Authority TBN, which is a quasi-governmental organization in broadcasting. They said local government and quasi-government participating in the ongoing business competition may result in slanted screening, so TBN should be excluded from the list of operators.
Okay, so there are some private bids, but they're kind of nervous about going in competition with a part government bid.
That's right.
Okay, go on.
So they added if Gyeonggi-do or TBN is selected, they will naturally follow Seoul Transportation Broadcasting Station, which is currently a little bit controversial right now in political and social scenes.
And they're concerned that even if every station is trying to secure like fairness and political neutrality, there might be problems if an organization that's affiliated with the Road Traffic Authority is selected as the operator.
Exactly. The 5 companies said once a local government owns a broadcasting company, direct or indirect involvement and control will be inevitable. Since it's operated with local residents' taxes, it will damage trust in the original role of terrestrial broadcasting to check and monitor the city.
And of course, when I tell my students to think critically, I always tell them, look where the money's coming from when you're trying to check where the bias might be coming from.
Right. So
the governor appoints a broadcasting programming manager, and it's hard to imagine that there would be completely disinterested, with totally bias-free appointment from that. And of course, here in Korea, we've seen controversies before where high government officials got involved in naming who's in charge or how media networks are run. I don't really want to name specific names right now, but we have seen what happens before when politics and media get mixed up, and it's not a positive for freedom of speech or for healthy public discussion.
That's right. And the 5 companies argue that the Gyeonggi Media Foundation could be appointed by the government officially under the Public Enterprise Act, so it could undermine fairness, independence, and bias of reporting. So even though TBN received the highest score in the selection, the Korean Communications Commission decided to put the final decision on hold due to the need for a legal review on the performance of the reporting function.
Well, I think it's a good idea, though, to kind of slow down, press the brakes a little, and to take that process a little more carefully and make sure that it's happening transparently, because public trust is so important in the media. And part of that is transparency in who's leading the outlets and why. So without trusting the process, of course, the public also won't trust what comes out of that station once it's named. So thank you for bringing this topic into the studio today, Angela. And I have a question for you.
Yes.
You were talking about comedy that is offensive earlier. So my question for you is, there are some people who think that it's kind of a comedian's duty to be a little offensive and to get people thinking. What's your opinion about that?
So it's a very hard topic because, sometimes it's hard to make people laugh. And I think it's one of the hardest thing that you can do to make someone laugh, the humor.
Sure.
But I think it's also the comedian is a public figure, and it's that the person's responsibility and duty to make sure you don't undermine and demean anyone and offend anyone. So it's a sensitive topic, and I know it's challenging to make someone laugh, but I also think it's their duty to be very cautious about that.
Yeah, I feel like there's a balance somewhere between, finding the line where it's edgy and maybe a little uncomfortable, but still finding ways to stay respectful. I think it's healthy to have a public conversation like this about what's okay and what's not.
That's true.
But I don't think that means that it's fine for a comedian to just go around and be as offensive as possible. I think that there's a balance between a comedy and responsibility.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for bringing these topics in today, Angela. It's been great, and I hope our listeners have something to think about as well.
Yes, me too. Thank you.
And that's it for Media in Check. Welcome back. You're listening